Hello, and welcome to Tales from the Galactic Coffee Shop. I am Greg, Clone 48, here to bring you our first sci-fi tale about the clones on Station 9 and how it all began. For today's story, Origin of the Clones, we will go back to where the project began, with a small group of people on Earth who planned to conquer space for all of humanity. Of course, their project started in secret, and they managed to get a single person into space to get things going without anyone else on Earth knowing anything about it. Years later, the historian clone would affectionately refer to this unknown person as Bob, since his real name by that point had been lost forever. Now, Bob's job in space was to monitor and repair the automated equipment that was sent into space with him. This equipment, along with many robot attendants, would be used to build everything humanity would ever need when they finally took their first steps among the stars. The earliest modules included the factory station called Station 5, where all the equipment needed by future inhabitants would be built. Also, Stations 8, Station 9, and the Jovian Observation Station near Jupiter were all constructed during this time. In total, there were to be 12 original stations built in the solar system, and only one Bob to keep them all running with the help of hundreds of automated robots. Now during this time, Bob continued to receive supplies from Earth, with new equipment and the occasional special order item for Bob arriving every few months. It was also becoming very apparent that so many things had been built in space that Bob and his robots were having a tough time keeping up with everything. Bob's team had been so successful that there were now enough resources available for additional crew to be assigned to the stations that had been built. So, the secret leadership on Earth met and decided that the time had finally come for more people to be sent into space. Now, since the time that the project had started and the first rockets carried Bob and his supplies deep into space, it had become increasingly hard to launch rockets without fear of being discovered. While they were still able to get small shipments of supplies to Bob, being able to launch hundreds of new people into space would be all but impossible. They decided instead to pursue and perfect cloning technology. In this way, they would be able to create a huge, thriving, and diverse community of stations and worlds populated with copies of much of the population of Earth, without the constant launches and landings of the huge spacecraft it would otherwise require to transport those people. While this technology was being perfected, the secret leadership on Earth started to become more worried and paranoid about their secrets getting out and everybody knowing about their project. In response to this, they began consolidating their base of people who knew exactly what was going on. Companies on Earth that made supplies for Bob or made advancements to the technologies had no idea that they were being used in space. Eventually, the secret leadership was narrowed down to only 3 individuals who knew about and controlled everything to do with the stations, and a few factories that had no idea who they were manufacturing products for. Now Bob, being in space for decades by this time, had come to miss many of the things he had grown up with on Earth, especially the simpler things, and on the day he was ordering supplies for the next shipment from Earth, he was craving a liver sausage sandwich of all things, and included this request on his next order. The food processing factory on Earth obliged, specially manufacturing a tube of liver sausage and including it in their inventory under the appetizing name of sandwich paste, which was to be sent on the next supply shipment. At the same time, the cloning technology had finally been perfected, and the schematics and engineering drawings were sent to Station 5 for immediate manufacturing. Months passed, and the robots on the factory station made dozens of cloning chambers, installing them on both Station 5 and Station 9 so that the first batch of clones could finally be created once the base genetic material for the clones arrived from Earth. Meanwhile, the 3 remaining secret leaders of the project on Earth, with their ultimate goal finally within reach, became even more paranoid than they were before. For the guaranteed survival of the station's project, they decided that they could never be in the same place at the same time, so there would never be a single event that might disable or cause the death of all 3 of them. That way, someone in the leadership was all but guaranteed to survive and ensure the project's future. So it came to pass that the next supply ship was prepared for launch. Included in its payload was a tube of sandwich paste and a loaf of real bread. New equipment in this shipment included the last items needed for the cloning chambers to work, including the control sequencers and a compact genetic sample with enough material to create 10,000 different individual clones. The ship was secretly launched into space and on its way to Station 9, and the three leaders, each having watched the launch well away from the others, finally breathed a sigh of relief, and for the first time in decades, tried to take a few days to themselves before they were needed again. Unfortunately, those few days would prove to be their last. One car accident, one freak lightning storm, and a case of fatal food poisoning involving a birthday cake, and the secret leadership of the station's project was no more. Now, nobody left on Earth knew of the station's project's existence. Bob and the work he was doing on the stations was all but forgotten by the people of Earth. By the time the supply ship reached Station 9, Bob knew that something terrible must have happened on Earth, but had no concerns about it, for soon enough, all 12 stations would be bustling with 10,000 newly created clone people, and the project could then continue out into the stars. More importantly, his personal request, the tube of sandwich paste, had made it on this last supply run from Earth. As he unpacked the transport canister, he first retrieved the compact genetic sample material and placed it on the table. It was exciting that the plan that took so long to execute was finally entering this phase, and he was equally excited when he pulled out the next item, the tube of sandwich paste that he had requested. He set it on the table too, noticing how similar the genetic material appeared to be to the sandwich paste. It wasn't a problem, of course, because he had placed each item near the lids of the carrier that held the items' names. But as he stood up in his excitement, he accidentally knocked all the items on the table, including the sandwich paste and the genetic material, onto the floor. He quickly retrieved them and placed them back on the table, and soon enough made one of the tastiest and the most unfortunate sandwiches in modern history. He did not realize his mistake, however, until he began the first sequence of the cloning chambers. After cloning the material that turned out not to be the genetic samples, he battled the beast that emerged from the cloning chamber for days, finally trapping it in a cargo shuttle bay that he promptly sent to Station 5 for processing, where the base material is replicated to this very day as a food source for all the clones. All examinations of the material point to a genetic combining of a variety of food animals from Earth into a single monstrosity that tasted great on bread. Unfortunately, all the material that was to be used to create the clones had been eaten in a single sandwich, and no more supplies would ever arrive from Earth. Bob had no choice now, and proceeded to program the remaining cloning chambers on Stations 5 and 9 with his own genetic code. And as the first of these clones of Bob began emerging from their chambers to begin their work on the stations, Bob climbed into a newly constructed long-range shuttle and was never seen again. And this concludes Origin of the Clones from the Galactic Coffee Shop. This is Clone 48, Greg, signing off.